Welcome to 28 Days and Beyond.
The show where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture.
I'm Amari.
Charisma, welcome. Hello, Amari.
How you doing? What's going on?
I am doing well.
Yo, today we're joined by Morgan Jackson to discuss a very important topic, a very prevalent topic, or a very prevalent issue within our communities that unfortunately is not addressed as often as it should be, and that
Yeah.
is environmental racism. So we are joined now by Morgan Jackson. Hello, Morgan.
Hi, Morgan.
Hello. Hi.
How's it
How are
going?
you?
I'm doing pretty well. I don't really have a lot of homework tonight, so I'm pretty happy about that.
I hear
That's
that.
always a good thing. But it sounds
So,
like, in
Morgan,
addition to your homework, you've been occupying your time with doing research on environmental racism. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how you came to get interested in the subject?
Yeah, well, it just started as a small project that I had to do, like for an extracurricular activity outside of school, and
okay.
I actually dwelled into that because I found it really interesting since it seemed like it affected a lot of areas of my life and a lot of other places because it had a lot to do with climate change and how and where our waste is projected and how like we have these plastic plants, we have like these chemical plants that make like plastic and stuff being set in these like really poor uh communities of color.
Okay. So, what are some of the things that you found so far as your research in terms of how environmental racism has impacted different communities?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is probably the the Cancer Alley in Louis. That is a strip of land between Baton Rouge and another really large city in Louisiana, and it's like along the Mississippi River. It's along the river where it's just a bunch of petrochemical plants that are all there, and they're like in towns, and then there's a lot of uh people there that end up getting really sick because they have smoke, and I think it's called fine particle matter, and it's like really
Mm,
dangerous if you breathe in enough because of the toxins that it has in, which is like a combination of like soot and things like that. And I think because of that increase of cancer in that specific area, so that I thought that was really interesting.
yeah. And
And you also
terrible.
said that there are some aspects of your own, local neighborhood, or your local environment where you see these things at play as well.
Yeah, I know in like my downtown area, like the especially poorer part, it always like they have a river that goes through it, and that is a river that always floods, and it's really interesting when they that's where like that's like the lower end of the town, and that's like it. So I don't think that's like coincidental. And also in a larger, much larger city near me, they have they burn their plastic, their poor communities, like poorer,
Mhm.
smaller cities, and the residents are paying because of that.
Wow. I think it's interesting that we're having this conversation now, especially because of the terrible weather that Texas is having currently, and the fact that so many of the poorer communities are being impacted the most by these power outages, and the fact that there's no running water, and that folks are trying to use everything from their cars to stay warm to burning their clothes, and it goes back to your point of just showing how many communities are being impacted by environmental racism. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really thought about how really felt really interesting in how they're trying to use all of their things and how it isn't until stuff like tragic things like the snowstorm that just swept Texas where that gets people to really engage in the conversation and to really
Mhm.
talk about it, and it isn't just brought up daily so we don't have as desirous things like these, because I feel
Mhm.
like if more people were comfortable talking about, yes, we have to acknowledge all the all the disadvantages one community has as opposed to the other, then that would really help with like policy making, I feel like, and it would
Yes.
just really help those communities in general.
But why do you
100%.
think that this isn't as popular a conversation? I mean, this is something that affects all of us, whether, the independent of age or class or geographical location or race or whatever have you. Why isn't this a conversation that more people are having?
Specifically about climate change, environmental racism.
Climate
Both.
change and environmental racism, which, are linked, especially from the things that you're suggesting.
Yes.
Well, I think it's because it's one of those topics that people love to avoid talking about because those two factors might not affect people, so they don't just see it and they don't really think it's that large of the problem, even though it really is. So I just think it just see you don't see anything, so you don't say anything, and then
Yeah.
maybe you hear about like the incinerators, I think that they're called, in like Camden and um in Camden and like Chester, like in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and you like hear about them, and like you hear how I think in Camden like they have the highest amount of lead that's being burnt, and then even though that's really bad for like the community, it isn't like personally you don't think it's personally affecting your community, so you don't really do much about it. I just think it's like a selfish point.
Yeah. What would you like to see happen, Morgan, just in terms of, us moving forward in terms of how we can start to enact change in those areas? How can we start working towards fixing some of these issues that surround climate change and racism?
I mean, I just started journey of researching this topic, but so far what I've seen is probably notify like local leaders about it and notify like yes this is it, and be sure to point out examples that are in your area, because I feel like the more localized you can make it, the more directly it will transfer power. And also
Mhm.
if there is like if there's like patterns, which there are, of people getting certain illnesses disproportionately more than others, and to make sure to
Yeah,
point that out.
that makes perfect sense.
So, Morgan, if you were to leave our viewers with the sort of first step that they could take towards at least learning more about this subject, what would you suggest for them?
I would suggest for them to, first of all, just read and learn more about the subject. But
Hmm.
other than that, maybe actually pay attention and try to attend like your small town like council
Mm,
meetings, or like talk to the leaders of your, if you have a small community, and see if there's any differences in how in the locations in which the poor communities and the richer communities of your area are treated, and maybe bring that attention to, hey, this is kind of like a part of environmental racism, and how it's not just on large scales, maybe a billion miles apart. It also affects like your area and your.
mm.
Yeah. It affects everybody.
Yeah.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for joining us and sharing what you've learned so far. I'm really proud to see young people like yourself that are interested in making our world a better place and combating some of these issues that affect all of us. So thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been another episode of 28 Days and Beyond.
Where we talk about our history, our heritage, and our culture. We'll see you next time.